Good evening. I'd like to call to order this special town council meeting, workshop on the budget for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Counselor Allenson?
Here.
Counselor Carmody?
Here.
Counselor Fishbein? Counselor Laffin?
Here.
Counselor Marone?
Here.
Counselor Tata?
Here.
Counselor Testa?
Here.
Counselor Zandri? And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Yay, we have a quorum. Board of Education, tonight is all about you. Come on up. If you would, please remind us who you are for the record.
Good evening, Tammy Raccio, Board Chair.
Good evening, Danielle Belizzi, Superintendent, Wallingford Public Schools.
Hi, Dominic Barone, Business Manager.
Thank you. Looks like you have a presentation.
I do. Thank
Is that
you.
how you'd like to start?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us this evening. We're here tonight to present to you all the proposed Board of Education budget for the 23-24 school year. Before I get started, I just want to say a thank you to our central office team, our Board of Education, our building administrators, our curriculum administrators, and our business office team for all of their hard work with helping to put this together, because it definitely is a team effort. Tonight's presentation, I'm going to provide an overview of what we've worked on, our sustained budget, what compromises our sustained budget, identify our strategic budget items, and go through any questions that were asked from the April 10th meeting. So I do know on April 10th, when you had the public forum, there was some questions on our COVID-19 grant funding, so I'll include that at the end. It begins on slide 36, so we'll go through that as well. Just to give everyone an overview as to what goes into creating this budget and what things we look at student enrollment. We review all of our contractual obligations, salary increases, transportation, our maintenance. We also look at our sustained services and what makes up our sustained services and our strategic planning priorities. So you'll hear all of that this evening as we move through. I'm going to start off tonight with our sustained service, and I'll look at enrollment. This current slide not only talks about our student enrollment, but it also goes over our special education numbers, our 504, I'm not sure why, our 504 population, our EL population, and our free and reduced lunch. Let me see if I apologize. Oh, there it goes. Perfect. Thank you. So if you take a look, student enrollment, I'll start with that. You can see we've included from 2018 to 19 through the current year, and then what's projected for us for the school year. So you'll see we've kind of started off, it's gone down a little bit, it's gone up a little bit. This current year, we're down in our enrollment, but it's projected next year to go up just by a few students. Our special education population over the years has increased from 2018 to our current year, along with our 504 population. We are seeing an increase in both of those areas post-pandemic. A lot of what we're seeing is some of the effects of the pandemic. So you'll see that in the increases there, as well as our EL student population has seen an increase. Our free and reduced lunch, last year, our number of students that had qualified was down, but if you recall, last year was also a year where the entire school year lunch was free. So many of our families, even though we had messaged out to them to complete the applications to qualify, did not. When we came back for this current school year, the 2022-23, it was still considered free until about around December. Then we were back to charging students for breakfast and for lunch. And then it changed again to being free. So it's currently free again. So many of those applications were completed. We still continue with our food service director, Mr. Bondi, does still continue to message out to our families to complete that. So you will see an increase there as well. This current slide, which we take this information from the 211 website, and I included the source down at the bottom. So this information includes our child and adolescent mental health needs in the district. So we did a comparison of the 2021-22 school year to the current year. So you will see that we've completed through March for this current year, and you will see that the numbers have increased as we've gone through the school year. March, consistent with where it was last year, is tending to be one of our higher months. And this 211 is a service that our staff can call, families can call. It is a free resource, and it provides families with the services that they need, puts them in touch with services to support what their child may be experiencing. These services are provided to children up to the age of 18, but if adolescents are still in school, then it does include the 18 and over age range. This slide also looks at and breaks it down. Let's see, there it goes, perfect, thank you. This slide also includes information from that website as well, from 211. It does break it down a little bit further in terms of substance abuse, crisis and suicide, and mental health. And you can see where we're seeing those increases and in what buckets we're seeing them. In our district, we are very fortunate. We do have a large number of support staff within our district. So we are lucky to have at the 8 elementary schools, at each school, we have a full-time school psychologist and a full-time social worker. At our middle schools, we have 3 school counselors, and we have school psychologists and social workers, as well as our high schools are staffed with school counselors and school social workers. That does provide, they do a phenomenal job providing supports to our students. In addition to curriculum that we are also making sure, especially at the elementary level, that we are implementing on a daily basis to help our students with problem-solving skills, working on being able to communicate with express themselves. We also have worked collaboratively with Meriden Child Guidance, who comes in and provides small group instruction and supports to our students and families, along with Mandy Miranda at Wallingford's Youth Social Services. So we are continuing to look at this area and provide our families and our students with the support that they need. I'm going to move into our sustained budget services. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things we look at when we go through and formulate and create the budget is we look at contractual obligations. So if you look at our certified staff in the first box, you'll see the increases that we have moving forward that we've planned on for this coming year. Nurses are currently in negotiations, so we provided an estimate for that within the budget. We looked at our non-certified negotiated contract increases, and we've looked at retirement staff savings along with non-certified staff savings. So you'll see those 2 numbers down at the bottom as well. This year, based on enrollment, and sticking to what we use as our guideline for class sizes. So as a reminder, in our K-2 classes, it's up to 21 students in a class, and in grades 3 to 5, it's up to 23 students in a class. When we've gone through and looked at our enrollment, our projected enrollment for next year at the elementary level, we have noticed that we're going to need 2 additional elementary teachers. When we first formulated this budget in December-January timeframe, we were also anticipating that the current Latin teacher we have that's part-time we'd need an additional .4 FTE Latin teacher. At this time, based on the enrollment and student interest, we won't need to add that. So I just put it as a strike-through and just recalculated what the increase would be, including benefits. On our non-certified staff increase, we're looking at adding 4.5 para-educators to support our students with individualized needs. And we included an increase here, including an estimation on benefits of $137,000. We also looked at severance benefits to pay our certified staff, and severance benefits to pay our non-certified staff. So you'll see these 2 numbers reflected here as well. In addition, we've reviewed insurance. So initially, when we started the budget process and the budget was first approved by our Board of Education members, the projected increase for insurance was at 13.8%. It has since been revised to an 8.8% increase. So you'll see as I go through that there will be the difference of what was initially approved by the Board of Education and then a revised piece, and that's based on the insurance change. Transportation, we took a look at the contractual increase for our full-size buses, our 6% increase on our district vans and aids. This is the second year with our this will be coming up, the second year of our specialty transportation contract, which is our new bus contract. Last year, if you recall, this current year, they maintained the current rates that we had for Durham, previous transportation company, and then the coming year was going to be the increase. So next year will be the second year of the 5-year contract. We've looked at maintenance increases, contractual increases and estimates on bids and additional costs. And we've also looked at the fact that 4 of our schools, currently 2 of our companies, are going out for bid for the cleaning services. So you'll see an increase there as well. Also noted here is one of the mandates that is coming down that we need to make sure, and you'll see a little more detail on that as we go through, is that we need to make sure that there's an additional cost for menstrual products in our classroom, in our bathrooms, in our buildings that house grades 3 through 12. In addition, we looked at the water and sewer. We looked at our estimated electricity. We've also looked at the fuel, the cost of fuel, so our heat and our natural gas budget as well, which natural gas was flat funded. Some of these next items, I'm going to go through quickly, but give you an overview of what we call our uncontrollable costs. So you'll notice what we did here in these next 3 slides is give you the area, an approximate cost for each breakdown, and then a reason. So I'll highlight just a little bit underneath each of the sections, but at least it gives you an overview as to all the pieces that are coming into this budget. So under special education, you'll notice that a lot of this budget, all of this budget is made up of the mandated services, according to IDEA, our IEPs, tuition, transportation, assistive technology, professional development, evaluations, which makes up the cost of a little over $16 million. Personnel, we do provide our certified teachers with team training. We look at, we have our medical advisor for the district here. Legal fees are covered through here, ambulance services, minimum wage increase, and so that is comprised here of that $331,000. Under technology, we have our student management software programming, parent forms, we do computers for our teachers, student devices. This is where we pay for our website, phones, intercom repairs, maintenance, comes under this section. Facilities, I broke it down into two different buckets, and so I'm going to explain the first one at the $448,000, which incorporates the fire alarm inspections, extinguishers, emergency light inspections, turf and pest management, fire sprinkler system, elevator inspections, boiler inspections, and snow removal. The second one is what I referenced before, which you saw under facilities in some of our increases. According to Section 8 of Public Act 22-118, it requires that boards of education beginning September 1 of 2023 provide free menstrual products in women's restrooms, all gender restrooms, and at least one men's restroom. So these restrooms are need to be accessible, to students in grades 3 through 12. So this cost for the $65,000 is not including the product, but it's including in all of these bathrooms that our administrators have gone through and identified numbers per school, receptacles and things that need to be added to the bathrooms in order to accommodate the products. The last line there, the operations, that's the $19 million, which covers our health insurance, unemployment, workers' compensation, Social Security, financial audit, and goes through transportation as well for parochial schools. Curriculum and instruction, what we've included here is $107,000 for chemical hygiene contract, universal screen software. And the second bucket, the $500,000 that we have here, which to note $300,000 of that is within this budget, $200,000 of it is in grants that we're holding, is another mandate that's coming through, which is the right to read. And so this is in reference to Section 8-14 HHA, which mandates that each local and regional Board of Education implement for the coming school year, and each year after that, a reading curriculum model or program for grades pre-K through grade 3. This particular item, we were allowed as a district, as all districts were in the state of Connecticut, to submit a waiver so that we would not have to participate and do this. We did submit that. We're waiting to hear back in terms of a time frame, which should be in July. And in addition, we can also submit a financial waiver, which we are in the process of completing as well. But we did put a placeholder for this, and we have done our due diligence in terms of looking through programs to make sure that if we are not granted the waiver, what additional model we'd have to include, which gives us a total of a little over $37 million. Our strategic plan budget. So these are the following items that we had gone through and that the Board of Education recommends. So at the elementary level, 2 additional instructional coaches, which provide adult support in the areas of lesson planning, implementation of instructional strategies, data analysis to help inform their small group instruction. Also at the district level, an assistive technology teacher, which provides technology support to access education through the use of software and programming equipment. We did have this in our budget a few years back. We had a difficult time at that time finding a qualified staff member. Currently, we do have someone that works with us. It's just that we pay it for it as an outside consulting service at this time. An additional nurse for Lyman Hall High School. Under maintenance, an assistant to building and grounds, which would provide, assist with the management of 14 of our buildings and our fields. Under maintenance, ballards for the front and rear entrance of our high schools. We've put on a walk-behind floor scrubber Under maintenance, also to repair the playground and blacktop walking paths at Parker Farms Elementary School. At our Rock Hill Elementary School, the replacement of 11 classroom blinds. Multiple schools card readers at the entrances and exits. So we primarily have them at the front entrances, but it's become more obvious that we need them in other areas as well, because many of the students, may not have it if they're outside at recess, and so it's a longer distance to get the kids in and out of the building. Under our technology, we have cybersecurity, the replacement of intercoms at 2 of our elementary schools, Chromebook cases. Under adult education, many of the staff there, it's an increase to what they're working now. So it's an increase to our ABD and GED teacher of a 0.2, an ESL teacher, because we're seeing an increase in need, of a 0.2 FTE, technology coordinator, an increase of a 0.2 FTE, and then the secretary, an increase from 10 months to 12 months. Additional technology, computers required. Our adult education program is growing, and so we do know we're going to have some additional need there in classroom furniture as well, which gives us a total strategic plan request of $759,000. This section, the Board of Education recommended the following items as capital appropriation from the town of Wallingford. So the first item there is at Marktesian High School. It's the resurface of the track and to replace the turf there. The second item is Lyman Hall High School, the softball field. Pond Hill Elementary School, it's the gymnasium floor. At Dag Hammarskjöld Middle School, the academic wing elevator needs replacement. At Dag Hammarskjöld Middle School, renovate the ball fields. So you'll notice on this line, we had already allocated some of the money, but then there is an increase based on the inflation of costs of things in the project. And for Dag Hammarskjöld Middle School as well, the replacement of the back gym floor. In addition, at the elementary schools, air conditioning for the cafeteria and gyms, design work portion of it, and at Marktesian High School, 4 additional solar lights for the parking lot, for the student parking lot, which gives us a total request there of $2.9 million. So what does this all mean financially? So as I mentioned earlier, our original Board of Education budget request, the sustained budget was a financial increase of $6.6 million, which gave us the percentage of 6.06%, 2%, excuse me. The strategic budget items totaled $759,000, which was a 0.691%, which gave us a total increase of over $7 million at a 6.752% increase. This was when the insurance was higher at the 13.8%. When the insurance then was decreased to the 8.8%, we revised the sustained budget request. So the financial increase was $6 million, and the percentage increase went down to 5.532%. Strategic budget stayed the same at the 0.691% for a total percentage increase of 6.223%. On this chart, I wanted to highlight areas of the increase based on our sustained budget. So if you look at the sustained budget comparison by object, I'm just going to go through and highlight some of them. Object code 100 is our personnel services, and 200 is the employee benefits. So if you take a look, we have a comparison of years 2021 to 2022, the current year revised budget, and then the sustained budget for the 23-24 school year. So you'll notice the increase from the prior year of $2.8 million which is an percentage of increased budget request of 46.1%. Under the employee benefits, which is where our insurance is, you will notice that it's an increase budget request of 15.2%, so that's 925,000. So if you take a look, and those are two of our largest, which is what makes up a big portion of our budget. It's the majority of our budget of that $115 million request, almost $116 million. As you move through, you'll see if you look at 500, the purchase services, object code 500, that's where our transportation lies. So you'll see that since it's going to be the second year, as I mentioned earlier, that part does go up based on the new contract that we have, because that's year 2 of it. Durham, we kept the same rates this year, but next year it does go up. So you'll see that increase there as well. I also just wanted to point out in 600 is where the dollar amount is held for the reading program, the mandated reading program. So you'll also see a big portion of that in there as well, which adds up to our increase, which gets us to the 5.53%. This slide shows the revised sustained budget, the strategic, and then the overall of the 6.223%. The mayor has recommended to us this year an overall percentage of increase of 3.02%, which gives us a budget reduction of $3.5 million to the budget. Additional requests, after speaking with the mayor, was to move forward the Mark T. Sheehan High School, the resurface of the track and to replace the turf, and at Dag Hammarskjöld Middle School, the academic wing elevator replacement. I did want to include just what was percentage was asked last year and what was given last year to us for this current school year. So if you recall, a revised, sustained, and strategic Board of Education request was 4.88%. The mayor revised and gave us 2.98%, and town council had approved a 2.98% increase overall last year for this current year. This slide, is it coming, oh, one more time, thank you. There we go. This slide represents our unencumbered fund balance. So this is our current to-date balance that we have. You can see that these projections are based on the 22-23 allocations, a budget of $109 million that we have this year. And this projection assumes the 2 million of ARP ESSER funds during the 22-23 fiscal year. So I will get to that towards the end, but it does indicate that. So you'll see here we have the 500,000 in contingency and our benefits of the 554,000. We have special ed tuition included here, excess cost estimate, transportation, and our salaries. So you'll see, especially for the benefits and the salaries, that may change as we move through, but it's also based on vacancies that we still have open. So depending on the savings we may have, whether we are able to fill those vacancies quickly or not, and whether or not the people that fill them take our insurance or not. We do plan for them taking it, and we provide an estimate, as we move through for our budget. But some of our employees take it and some of them don't. This is a rundown of what's in our 2% fund summary. So you will see what's allocated. There's a 1.9 million in it. You'll see what's allocated towards energy efficiency. We have equipment, project-based projects, security, and then there is 384,000 that is to date unallocated but will be, and then the special education contingency is here. Grant funding. So funding we receive from these grants on the next few slides, to keep in mind that it supplements the yearly budget requests. So each of these grants come with their own specific guidelines and terms and a criteria for allocation of funding. Due to these guidelines, grant funding, it cannot supplant or replace allocated yearly operating budget funds. So they basically fall into two categories: entitlement or competitive. So I just provided just a quick little synopsis of what's entitlement grants and what's competitive grants, and what we use, where each one falls, some examples of each one. So entitlement could be the Title I, Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA grant, Title II. And our competitive ones, it's awarded based on a competitive process. So like your McKinney-Vento education for homeless children and youth, and then we have the Lowry 21st Century Community Learning Grant as examples. This is an update on our COVID-19 Relief Fund expenditures. So what we included here is the name of the grant, the years they go for, because each grant has a different number of term or years that they're for, the amount that was awarded to us, and the expended cumulative amount. So that amount is through June of 2023, what we're anticipating to spend by the end of this school year, and then what's remaining. Of all of the grants we have received and been awarded, they all total the 9.45 million. However, only the top grant, the ARP ESSER one, will be with us for one more year. The rest of these grants are done and need to be spent and completed by the end of this school year, so June 2023. Just the top one is the one that's left. Of the 4.5 million, we are anticipating for the 23-24 school year that we will have the 2.2 million allocated. Because that is the grant that is still continuing for the last year, I did want to include, and I believe it wasn't a question from April 10th, as to where the money has been spent. So there are 5 priorities within this grant when we completed it. This is a grant that is reviewed every 6 months and can be updated and revised based on student and district needs. So these are the 5 priorities, and you can see in the first year of the grant, 2021, 2022, we didn't spend as much of the 4.5 million because we still had other grants that we were spending money from. So then it was really more allocated to this current year and then for next year. Again, these are ones that can change as we move through. But in priority 1, the learning acceleration, academic renewal, and student achievement. So this is why this year we have instructional support teachers on special assignment for a year. We've done a lot of credit recovery and provided stipends to our teachers for the middle school and high school that provide that for our students. We've provided additional support staff, social workers, school psychologists. Priority 2 is the communication specialist. Priority 3, mental health services for summer support. So we've wanted to make sure that we've provided and given students and staff things that they need over the summer. So we use part of that to cover that as well. Instructional software and instructional consultants are what has come out of priority 4. And priority 5, the building safe and healthy schools. We've added additional float nurses. We do have 1 school nurse in all of our schools, but finding subs or times that we need additional staff hasn't always been that easy. And so we have float nurses that work with us as well, and health office assistants. And then additional cleaning services. So in the first 2 years of the grant, when we were still in the pandemic and coming out of it, we were directed to provide additional cleaning throughout the buildings, and so that covered the additional part-time cleaning staff at all of our buildings. As I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to provide a list of the grants. I have to say our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction and our Assistant Superintendent for Special Education worked very hard to complete these applications for these grants to ensure that our district does receive them and meet the criteria to get them. So we are very fortunate with the grants that we have. So this is a list of what we have here, our security, ESL, and others that we're entitled to. Oops. Along with our special education and adult education grants. And that is our budget. Questions?
First up, Counselor Allenson.
Hello. So this is very interesting. The Right to Read program, is this punitive? Is the Right to Read, my understanding of the Right to Read program is that when you have scores at a certain level, the state kind of intervenes, but.
So the Right to Read program, I'm very passionate about this as a parent with a student who has a reading disability. The Right to Read program is legislation that has been mandated for every single district in the state of Connecticut, regardless of what your scores are. The Right to Read program is mandating that certain programs approved by the state of Connecticut be purchased and implemented in every district unless you achieve a successful waiver process. The Right to Read program, in my opinion, teaches the program, not the child. What we have done over the course of several years is really develop programs. There's different types of reading programs that children respond to, and the mayor knows I could talk about this forever. It could be a Linda Mood Bell program, it could be an Orton Hand Gilling program, it could be a Wilson program. Every child responds differently based upon where their need is. Are they having trouble with phonics? Are they having trouble, in any one of the particular 5 areas of reading? So what we've done over the past 4 years now is work with a consultant, Literacy How, who has come into every single elementary school and has brought in information and trained teachers, including our interventionists, on the science of reading. Why is that important? That's important because our college prep programs are not doing that. So we get a teacher out of college who comes into the classroom, and then they need to be taught how to teach the science of reading. So we are putting professional development in every single elementary school to teach the teachers how to do that. That also means that as we pull teachers out of the classroom to do this program, and it's not a one-day program, it's an ongoing professional development, we then need to put substitutes in those classrooms. Then we need to have, you don't just go to a class and then go back and you can implement what you learn. We have instructional coaches who go in and actually help those teachers. Which children need which type of service? Maybe you have a group of 5 that are working on one particular area of reading. You have another group of 5 working on another area of reading. Those small groups are broken out in every classroom. And then the teacher is given guidance how to give assignments and differentiate instruction to the needs of those students. So right now, Wallingford, because we've been proactive, working with Literacy How for years, we're actually in a very good place with our reading program, and we don't want to buy a curriculum off the shelf and then have to re-implement something that will not service every child anyway. So hopefully, I think out of the 169 districts in the state of Connecticut, over 150 have applied for the waiver. So that tells you something by itself. But hopefully we will find out whether or not the waiver is being granted to us, but there's one person at the state who will be looking into the waivers and reviewing them. So it is for all districts.
Okay, that actually leads me to my next question, which is on instructional coaches. I know this has been a hot topic since I was on Board of Ed. I get it that maybe this is because of the Right to Read program, this might become a necessity, or it may just preclude the necessity. But I'm hesitant, again, on instructional coaches because we don't seem to be realizing a score benefit where we have implemented the coaches. So I'm worried that if we continue to add more oversight, and then we're basically taking away the actual in-class teaching, because instructional coaches are for teachers, not necessarily for students. I mean, it's a benefit, right? But
they're in the classroom. I'll let Ms. Stevens.
So they are working with them in the classroom. So they could be in the classroom working with them, doing instruction together. It could be a time that they mutually agree upon to meet and review data, not necessarily taking them out of the classroom, but if it's a time when they agree to do it during their planning or after school or before school, or we have multiple professional development days. So that's all kind of tied together. So it's not necessarily always pulling the teacher out of the classroom. It's providing the hands-on support and modeling within the classroom, kind of working together on things, trying new things, analyzing data, looking at instructional implications, going back, and then trying those things, resources, materials. So it's a collaboration more than pulling them out all the time, because that's not, I understand where you're coming from. And that's the purpose.
I think I'm actually coming from a place where it's basically we continue to see growing needs as far as social emotional. And we have concerns about class sizes and all of these other things. But if we have 2 teachers in one classroom, it's essentially pulling them away from something else, right? So that's my hesitation on that point. I've never heard anything, despite probably 6 years now of going through this between Board of Ed and Town, 5 years now, right? Between Board of Ed and Town Council, of asking questions about what do you think of instructional coaches. I mean, I honestly, I get it that you want to make it equitable across all grade levels. It's just still a big sticking point to me that we keep adding more and more high-level administration level. I know they're not really administrators, but they're over there. It's still taking teachers away from teaching type of thing. Students, right? So 2-on-1 as opposed to 1-on-1, I get it, but I think that's my hesitance, and also back in the day, I mean, I went to teaching school. I didn't graduate. Okay, so nobody get on me about that. I went for Spanish Ed, and it's not easy. I left because I ultimately didn't want to do it. I didn't like what I found in my internship, right? So my heart goes out to everyone. I think you guys are heroes, administration, teachers. I think that you guys do a wonderful job, but I just worry about the balance of student to teachers and how much money we spend in teachers not being traditional teachers versus having instructional coaches, lots of administration, people writing curriculum. We have more administration in this district, I think, than a lot of other districts have. And that, while it does give you the idea of growth potential, it also, I imagine, when you work under an umbrella that's like that, like most corporations have flattened, right, and kind of decentralized their model, because it helps to work across organizations when you have less leadership. I worry in this instance, and I realize that education is very different from public sector, but I just worry that we are going to become a mushroom cap of too much up here and not enough down here doing the work. It's just a too many chefs situation. So I'm still hesitant on instructional coaches. I'm sorry. I know right to read is probably actually making it a necessity too, but and then okay. So beyond that, maintenance. The assistant for Mr. Deptula The 110, I'm guessing, is including benefits? Okay. Then para educators, what grade level, it looked like we were looking to add?
Yeah, I don't have the specific grade levels. It's more district-wide right now, so it's dependent on the student need.
Sure, sure. Okay. And then the 3.5 million reduction, is any of that reduction the 2 or so million that the mayor is asking or saying we can bond, or you can bond? So it's a $3.5 million reduction on top of that. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Laffin?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I liked the flow and the way that it was presented this year. And I apologize for the kind of stream of conscious questions that I jotted down as we went through. And I apologize if I missed something in all of that. The right to read waiver timeline. When do we find out whether that is waived or not? $500,000.
So we're hoping for July 1. So that's when the state is letting us know, hopefully. So we're waiting to hear from them.
Okay.
There is pending legislation to try to extend that timeline. So should that legislation pass and the governor signs it, we may have that.
It'll
Another
take
year.
longer to find out whether it's
It may
waived.
take longer to find out. No, but it may extend it another year. Basically give the state another year to look at all the waivers.
Okay. So if they extend it, then we don't have to do it yet, or?
Correct. So then that would mean the implementation year gets pushed back a year.
Okay. Strategic plan, the way it appears on page 25, does that mean you spent nothing on the strategic plan last year? Because it says the increase matches the.
Correct.
Okay. And then page 29, you referenced the increase-decrease of $3.5 million. That's an increase-decrease in the, a decrease in the increase, not a decrease in the overall budget.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Thank you.
That's right. Life of the Sheehan track. How long would the new Sheehan track be? All this talk about whether we're going to do one high school, two high schools, where it's going to be, we don't know. When I was on the Board of Ed and we did the Sheehan track, I thought it was 10 years. That was more than 10 years ago. I think it's the same track.
Correct. It is the same track.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking more like 20 years. And so,
Okay.
So whether it's one high school, two high schools, you know, in my mind personally, it is an investment worth it because we are not the only ones that use that track, meaning the district students. I mean, it's used, Park and Rec uses it, other premier leagues come and use it, sign up to use it over the summer as well.
Okay, so that would retain, regardless of what happens with the school systems.
Correct.
But a property worth 15 years
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
of field, and that's field and track, or just the track
Correct.
itself?
It's the
Field and
turf,
track.
and yes,
Okay.
it's the turf and the track.
And Councilor Laffin, one more thing on that. Even if we made a decision for whatever happens with the high schools today, by the time that's done, we would not be able to hold any meets at Sheehan anymore. That track and field is in that rough of shape
Yeah.
that they would come in and say that it was unsafe for meets.
Okay. 2% fund unallocated, it's only at 384. Everything else is kind of already spec'd out and done, and that's your gray area, that's your buffer, okay. And the, when we get into the COVID grants, things like the floating nurse, what happens to them next year? Because that's a salary, that's a person, that's two people.
That's two people,
And
correct.
then are we, maybe you don't know yet, are we absorbing them, we letting them go, or other people are retiring and?
Right, so they're not part of like the nurses union, so they are, it's like having a long-term sub for the year, a permanent sub for the year that we
Okay.
do in the teachers. So it's more of a, they know they're here for now, but it's year to year.
Okay,
and not
great.
something
That answers that
stays.
question
Yep,
perfectly.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Maroon?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with Councilor Allenson and her concerns about the growth at the top, because there certainly seems to be a trend where we're reducing teachers and increasing at the top. But my question's not really on that. to get back to the right to read and all that. So I know in September, October, our test scores were substantially below, I think, where we'd like them to be as a community. I guess I kind of expected to see more in the budget to address our deficits in reading and math. Can you kind of talk about what we're doing to improve our test scores?
Sure. So I have to say a couple of things. We're continuing to look at our curriculum, revise our curriculum as we move through. We provide professional development. It's on a cycle, our curriculum, so we're always looking at that. Our instructional coaches that you mentioned earlier are also providing and supporting our staff with looking at curriculum supports, resources that we have, looking at instructional implications and data analysis. We are continuing also to provide professional development for all of our teachers in terms of, in the elementary level for Literacy House. So that is something that we have. We have a math consultant that comes in and also provides hands-on supports throughout the year, as well as Literacy House. We're on a numerous, many years of having them, and we'll continue. We try to make sure that all of our staff gets the support that they need. Along with our curriculum administrators are also there providing supports, looking at the curriculum, helping our teachers out with materials and any supports that they need to be successful to meet the students' needs. So we are continuing to look at that and to monitor growth and do what we can to make our students be successful.
So the pandemic seemed to hit Wallingford a little harder than other communities with regard to test scores and whatnot. What are your thoughts on why that is?
I think my thoughts on that, I don't know 100%. I think we're looking at the needs of our students and the diversity of our students, and we're providing them what they need at that time. So we're just making sure we have the staff to provide the supports for the families, for the students, both academics and social emotional.
And Councilor Merlin, if you go back to slide 5, where we talked about enrollment, from 2018 to this current year, our enrollment's dropped 501 students. Yet the high need population in our district has increased. So that's an inverse relationship, and the high need population is requiring more supports and services. So that will also impact our scores.
So just so we're on the same page, can you define what you mean by when you say high need?
Sure. When you look at that slide and you see special education population, 504, English language learning students, and free and reduced lunch students or socioeconomically challenged families, those are high needs areas. And when you add those, if you added those 4 columns for 2018 and you added and compared to 2022, 2023, we've gone up in the high needs area, even though our enrollment has dropped 501 students.
I see. Okay, thank you. So on the special ed contingency budget, how did we come up with 600,000 as sort of, 600,000 in round numbers? How did we arrive at that figure?
Is it on? Okay. The year we set that up, that was basically pretty much our unencumbered balance from the year before. And we were projecting a large deficit at the beginning of the year in special ed. So instead of doing projects and all that, we set it aside for tuition, transportation, those types of needs. So it was really what we had at the time.
So you're saying in this last budget, in the current year, for the current year?
No, are you talking about the 2% set aside?
So in the 2%, yeah, I'm sorry, you have 600,000,
Yeah.
yeah.
647 and some change. So it was probably 4 years ago or 5 years ago, we projected a significant deficit in tuitions. And so rather than take the prior year's unencumbered funds and request to buy vehicles and equipment, we said, let's set it aside there in case we have a budget problem. And it's been there, we used a little bit of it, but it's pretty much been there since then.
Understood,
So,
okay.
so that was, I think it started at 702 or roughly about that
Right.
amount.
Okay. All right, and then I guess just a general budget question. So we've done the strategic versus sustaining for a long time, probably since I've been on the Board of Education. And what it seems like is, year after year, the strategic gets smaller and the sustaining gets larger, right? And one could say, well, the argument could be that it's because you get cuts and so you have more, it costs more to sustain the district. Or it could be that, from a certain sort of campaign perspective, that if the more you put in the strategic, the more important, that you sort of emphasize that number. Have we outgrown this sort of strategic versus sustaining budgeting model?
But your sustained is the recurring costs. That's what's needed to keep the lights on and run the district. So the strategic are the one-off type of track and field, safety security items, those type of things that really you wouldn't want those in a in a sustained budget.
I understand the argument, but I feel like we've sort of blurred the lines between strategic and sustained, because there's a lot of sort of things I think there's a lot of overlap sort of in things that I would consider more strategic than sustained, that we sort of put in the sustained category.
Like recurring costs?
No, certainly not recurring costs. Just to go through some of the items you had listed here. Like we had adds to staff and some other items like that. I guess it's funny because, I've spent a lot of time looking at other districts' budgets recently, right? Just to sort of get an idea of percentages of administrators and so on. And our system is kind of unique, and I guess I just wanted your thoughts on it.
The system in terms of our structure,
Correct.
in terms of how many administrators we have?
I guess this, in my head, sort of goes to a larger discussion, right? Because a lot of districts don't manage their own fields and roadways and sort of things like that. So it sort of blurs the lines too, because then we're paying for things that are like, the reconstructing the field, say, would be an example that's not really educational on the one hand, but it's something that's sort of a part of your budget, right? So we sort of inflate your budget by things that are not, all the buildings are town buildings, right? So and obviously this is not for this year, but I guess maybe in the future it would be interesting to look at it as sort of a, capital for the whole town as opposed to just the school versus the town.
I don't disagree. I think now I understand what you're saying, and I think that is a great idea. I think looking at a lot of the items that we have underneath the strategic maintenance especially, they are larger items that are kind of tied together. And so some districts do create systems where they have a capital item or a maintenance and strategic item that's more of like a waterfall that's done in collaboration with the town council, so everybody's looking at it in the town as a whole, because to your point, we're not the only ones that use some of these items, but we do maintain them. So, yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Can I squirrel for 1 minute on that last comment? As a result of COVID, and when the state was putting together the HVAC grant application for districts to get funding to put air conditioning and air improvement things in their schools, the state sent out a survey, and they revised the survey on their structure of what's the state of your facilities. And one of the things that they asked all of the districts in Connecticut is, do you have a capital plan for your school district? And then the next question was, is your capital plan, 5-year capital plan, is it funded? Wallingford was in the small bucket of 26% of the districts that does not have a 5-year capital plan for every building with funding matching and tied to it. Then the third question was, is your funding on track, or is your district behind in funding that? I would love it if we could come forward and say, look, this is everything that we need. This is what every school is going to need in the next 5 years, and we can plan for that. I agree with you. It's difficult to say, all right, well, how much of our budget is going to be left over? Look at some of the things that are on the strategic list here. There's safety items in here, and that's a huge priority for us. So we're now going to go back and take what's left of our sustained. We'll come and say, can we carry it over and put it in a 2% fund? And then we're going to start picking off things that are the safety items in here and go back to the schools to do that. And I don't mean safety items like curbs and sidewalks and stuff. I'm talking about like ballards in front of some of our schools. And that's really, ideally, if as a community And I know it's in the plan of conservation and development to have a community, a town-wide capital improvement plan that was really be a roadmap of where are we heading. And I know, Councilor Marone, you were on the board when the board first started separating what's the request for facilities items versus the actual budget items. So we weren't taking money for textbooks and fixing curbs. And that would be awesome if we could get to the point that everybody was clear on what's coming down the pike for all of our schools. And we don't get into a position that we're having a conversation that we need $1.8 million to fix a track, or within the next couple years, they won't be able to have meets there. It always feels like we're chasing. And, it would be wonderful if we could get in front of that. Thank you for that question.
Counselor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I want to just go back to the reading waiver one more time. So my understanding was that the districts that had certain low scores, that was why that program was implemented. You're saying that's not why?
So the original legislation, originally, was for alliance districts, and there was funding for those alliance districts. But then there was...
Sorry, can you just define alliance districts?
Sure, alliance districts are the top lowest performing districts in the state. So the lowest performing districts are considered alliance, and they get certain funding and certain, above what a regular reimbursement of a municipality is. Originally, not the past legislation, but the original legislation, this program and the right to read targeted those districts. But there was public opposition to that. Why are you only focusing on right to read in 10 districts across the state instead of every district? The legislation was amended, and the legislation that passed now applies to the entire state. What did not change is they did not add funding for everybody in the state. The funding only stayed that was originally planned for the alliance districts.
And we were not
Oh, no, we're not
one
an
of
alliance.
those?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so are the waivers going to be, what are they basing the waivers on? Is it based on test scores, need? I know you said it's just one person who's deciding.
So I will give credit to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mrs. Carrie Latour, and our Curriculum Coordinator, Angela Wukiri, who spent a tremendous amount of time with their teams submitting the waiver, which is, I want to say, around 30 pages or so. So they gave them a criteria of what to put in. We had to provide our curriculum, reasoning, and all of our consultant work, professional development work, everything to it. It is our understanding then they're going to read it and get back to us. So it hasn't been as clear as we'd like it to be from the state in terms of the timeline, in terms of the criteria, just that everyone had to apply for it, irregardless of your scores. So we'll wait then. Part of this legislation is that they had given us a list of programs to choose from. So it's 7 programs. We sat and went through all of them. We listened to them come out and provide their materials to us, go over what they provide, and that's where we came up with what it would look like and what it would cost for us. And so we're waiting to hear about that as well. And so the hope is, we'll see if it gets delayed another year as well, and also apply for the financial waiver to go with it.
Okay. So we were never identified as a district that was in need. We were identified as when every district had to.
Every district has to do it. So,
all right, good.
yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think it's on pages 22 and 30, and Councilor Laffin already discussed it a little bit. To redo the Sheehan track and the Lyman Hall softball field, while normally I would be all for projects like that, because I think we should be maintaining and keeping our things nice. At this point, with the 2 high schools decision pending, I'm having a really hard time justifying spending over $2 million on those at this point. So that's a tough one to see with everything kind of in flux. So I would love to see us maybe hold off on those.
Sure.
I know the track's in rough shape, but
It is, and I will say this, our maintenance department does a fabulous job repairing that. I just don't know, for whatever happens, if it is ever decided that it goes to one high school, let's just say, I don't, that could be 5 to 7 years. And so the concern on our end is how long will that be, will we be able to continue to maintain fixing it for the next 5 to 7 years? In addition to that, thinking future, if it is, still something, we go to one high school, in my opinion, it's something we can still utilize. We will have teams that can still use then both of the fields and provide, we can provide transportation to continue to use that. The town can continue to use it for park and rec. So in my mind, just because it won't be located per se to where the high school is, doesn't mean they still can't use it. In the town I'm in, my kids, use Sage Park because at Berlin High, and they take transportation back and forth for soccer, for football. And I do know they are constantly checking schedules to make sure who can use that at that time. So in my mind, it's another ability for us to be able to have 2 of those turfs available to our students,
Sure.
irregardless.
yeah, and I can understand that. But I also don't want to be making decisions because
I agree.
we spent money on something, and so now we say, well, we have this track that's good for 20 years, so now let's,
I understand.
what if the Sheehan property gets sold? I mean, we just don't know. So I understand your point, but it's a difficult ask for me at this point. The $500,000 that is budgeted for contingency, which is mentioned on page 34, I believe. This is in addition, so this would be your, like an annual contingency account. And then you also have the 647,000 special ed contingency that's sitting in the 2% account. Your contingency in this current budget, do you know what it was and how much of that you've spent to date?
It's 500,000 rounded. I think it's like 499.
Yep.
And we have not spent any.
You haven't, okay. My next question. I believe I remember one of the meetings that, Superintendent, your budget, that the Board of Ed actually added money to that. So this might be a Board of Ed question, actually. How much was that, and what exactly was what will that be going for? What was the rationale for adding those funds to what the superintendent had recommended?
So I think the original budget that central office put together had a much lower contingency, and the Board of Ed wanted to maintain the existing contingency. So we didn't add funds to it, we maintained the existing contingency from the prior year. And that's simply because, I mean, if you just look at what's on there, utilities alone this year would have eaten up all but $25,000 of that contingency. With the gas prices, electric, oil, that was a large area that we intentionally, as a board this year, for the first time, have not done transfers because we wanted to see at the end of the year really where the deficits were by line item. And I think that was a good thing, because at the end of the year, we'll be able to clearly identify better, without reversing transfers and working back to an original number, where our accounts were really over budgeted, or maybe in some cases, we need to step back and say, do we really need to have, once we can get a better handle on what the transportation is going to be for some of these costs, maybe that's an area that we can say that we don't need to reserve as much. That's been a hard area to reduce right now because it's our first year with a new transportation company. But, that's another option that we'll look at. But again, we didn't add to it, we restored it to the original amount.
Well, when I say you add to it, you added to what the superintendent recommended, correct?
To the original central office budget, which, Mr. Barone, I don't know if you have that number. It was 2-something,
It wasn't,
50 or
okay.
280, something like
Yeah,
that.
I don't have it with me, I apologize.
I'm sure you have it.
280 was me?
Yeah.
I don't off the top.
Oh.
Do you think it was 280,000 at the Board of Ed?
I think that was the proposed, and we brought it back up to the 500.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So the Board of Ed basically added 500 to what the superintendent had recommended?
No, we would have added 220 to the 280 to get to the 500.
Okay, got it. I thought,
And it could flip-flop the other way. They could have been 220, we added 280. I'm not sure, but it was a little bit more, it was about half. That's
Okay.
probably a safe guess.
and that was the only one? I thought it was a higher number. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think for sustain, I think in the strategic, we had recommended several items, and then we added more as we went through the process.
Right, so on the strategic,
Yep.
we were going to take our top priorities, 2 or 3 or 5, and only put those forward. And the board had a robust discussion about, really, as a council, don't you want to know what all the pending projects are? It's not as good as a 5-year plan, but if we just bring 1 or 2 things to you every year, you don't really know what's coming down the pike. We knew that we would not get 100% of the strategic items that we put forward, but we wanted to be fully transparent that these are all concerns and areas that we needed to do with the facilities, the safety issues, the other things that are out there.
Okay, so those were, let's see.
I think that came to 700 and something.
$759,014,
Thank you.
Right, so that's the total as it stands.
total correct.
Okay, but
21, page 21.
yes, okay, thank you. And then so in the administration's budget, there were a bunch of these items were not included, you're saying, and then the Board of Ed said, let's put them back in so that
Correct.
we could see the whole list.
Correct. So when we did this as a central office team, we had flagged and identified top priorities for our strategic. But also part of what we provide to the Board of Education is a complete list of all of the strategic items. And so we go through that with them as well. So even though we may have flagged as a central office team, I'm going to say 10 top priority items out of numerous, then when we sat and we talked through all of them in the strategic budgets, in all of our strategic budgets, that's when we added additional ones to it.
Okay, understood, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess the only, what else do I have here? Oh, and just as a, just for the sake of the public or anyone who's maybe not familiar with the way the Board of Ed budget works, so it's a little bit different than the town budget where, and I know you all know this, obviously, with any other town department, their budget line items have to stay where they are. And if they need to switch anything, they have to come back to the council and get approval from the administration to do that. Whereas with the Board of Ed, the budget is presented to us, and this is obviously, close to what you're going to do, but the Board of Ed can switch around their line items. So basically, we approve the lump sum, and the Board of Ed can kind of do what they want. And I just wanted to mention too, for example, on page 29, when we're talking about the financial decrease, and it's the negative, 3.5, it's not a budget cut. And every year I get nervous that people, you hear reduction and cut. It's a decrease to the proposed increase. So the increase is still 3.02% as the mayor presented in his budget. So I always get nervous that people hear the word decrease or reduction and they think it's a reduction from where we currently are. It's not. It's still a 3.02% increase from the current year. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank my colleagues for a lot of the comments. I agree with a lot of the concerns that were raised, so I'm not going to reiterate a lot of that. But on page 29, looking at the mayor's recommendation as compared to your ask. Your ask was a 6.223, so the mayor's approval was a 6.020 to keep it on the same line. Therefore, what is the actual decrease? Is 6.203, something like that? 3.203. Do we know? What's the difference?
The difference between what we asked for and what,
Yeah.
and what was, the mayor recommended is 3.515 million.
Okay, which equates to approximately 3.3 million.
Yes, yes, it was like 3.2 million in there, correct.
Okay. And then the track at Sheehan is currently used by the Board of Ed, Park and Rec. Are there any other outside groups that are allowed to use that field?
Yeah, so they can come in and complete a building use form with our administration. And so they'll look at the schedules and see if over the summer it's available, and then they will use it.
And how much do we charge them?
I'd have to go back and ask. To be honest, I don't know the exact amount of what the charge is for it.
Okay, and, I mean, because we're hearing about wear and tear and all that stuff, and, you know, I brought this up, I think, when we redid the field 10 years ago. So, you know, it's our field, and I think I brought it up before, the decision was made. I think it can only negatively impact wear and tear. On page 34, I understand, there's notes to the side. I understand the first one. The first one saying if ultimately you get what the mayor has approved, the left would reflect certain things, but those things may get decreased if it gets cut further, right? Like the contingency, no?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Okay.
cut you off.
Well, no, that's fine. So this is based, so the note says, these projections based upon a 22-23 allocated Board of Education budget of 109, so on and so forth, right? So if you get 107, let's just say, I would think one of the things you would cut is the contingency that's reflected on the left, right? Or no, please?
This is saying, this is basically what this is, what I tried to say what this is. We have a current year budget of 109,897,692. Right now, when I look at this year's budget, right now, we are going to spend 109,897 minus the 934,000. That's currently what our unencumbered funds are in the current year budget. It's not next year's budget. And also, the other note is to say that we're also using 2.1 million of ARPESR grant money in addition to the 109 million.
And that's where I wanted to end up. What is, and I can't tell from this, what is the 2.2 million in ESSER being used for in this budget?
So it is slide 39. So what I tried to do here is just kind of give a brief description underneath each one of those priorities as the ARP ESSER grant details for us what we've used the money for to date. And so you'll see in that first year, because it's a 3-year grant, the 21-22 school year, we had other grants that we were still spending down and using, so we didn't use as much of this. Then in the second year, which is our current year right now, we have instructional support teachers, we use it for credit recovery stipends, and so on. So these are the buckets of where we have it, and then the dollar amount. And then what we're projecting for the 23-24 school year.
Okay, I got
And the
it.
use of it.
So the last column is the appropriation of the 2.2, where it's going to be used
Correct.
in this budget.
Correct.
Okay, that's
And we can reallocate, like if we see that there's more need in social, emotional, mental health, which may very well be the case, we can move within those 5 priority areas, but we have to stay in those 5 priority areas. Every 6 months, we have an option to reallocate.
Right. So then when we reallocate, we also revise through the state to let them know, and we move it. So we have that option, but obviously it has to stay within that dollar amount. And then next year is the last year for that. So we do it based on student need as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I would hope we do everything on, student need and scores, which
6
gets me
months.
back to scores. So, I know the question was asked, what are you doing about scores? And I heard the answer, but have we set up goals? I mean, does anything stop us from saying, that, or rewarding or something like that when scores are, because I would expect that we're not happy with the scores, right? Is anybody happy? I mean, please raise your hands. We've talked about merit pay, which I know is for most part a non-starter, but, it is possible based upon not individual classrooms, but based upon grades through a school. I mean, I think this is generally the time that we're seeing these kids in high school as a reflection of the merger, the redoing, right? So, and it's not working. The numbers are just not, it wasn't what we were sold. So, I mean, what are we looking to do to get scores up? I mean, if we give you what you're asking for, what you went to the mayor with originally, are you going to tell us that the scores are going to get 10% better? Or do we flat fund and because the scores aren't going to change? I'm just trying to figure out, I want the scores to be better.
Who wants to go first? COVID has impacted all districts. One of the outcomes of COVID is a higher truancy rate also. And if children don't come to school, they're not going to learn. That's another impact that we're all dealing with. As a Board of Ed, we get the scores, so we take the scores very seriously. We get them, everybody is assessed in the beginning of the school year to see where they fall. Are they in need of immediate intervention? Are they on watch? Or are they at grade level? They also get tested several times. This is our district testing now. This is not state mandated SBAC testing. They also get tested several times during the year. And when I say tested, we have the principals come in front of the Board of Ed and explain what their testing is by grade level to say, our third graders were here and now they are here. Our second graders were here, now they're here. Over the past probably 6 or 7 years, we've become very consistent in our approach and our resources that which students go into intervention to receive services. We monitor if the student has been in intervention for any period of time. We have a PBIS system, which is basically an overview of the intervention. If they're in intervention and they're not making progress, then there's a larger discussion. Should there be testing done? Do parents agree to the testing? Sometimes we may want to test and a parent may say no. So there's a whole host of things that happen around the test scores. It is not changing a lesson planning or having a teacher deliver material in a different manner that's going to bring up a child's test score. In addition to that, we have fantastic teachers. Our teachers in the district receive a lot of professional development. We are blessed as a district not to have the amount of open positions as some of the surrounding districts in our neighborhoods have. We are very lucky. Sometimes we're guilty as a Board of Ed as we accept people who come to work here because we know they're leaving more difficult districts that have 35 students in a kindergarten class, and then they're coming to our district. And those are some of the alliance districts, and we know, those districts need the help and they need the teachers too. But when we post a position and they come to us, we hire them. Having said that, it's not, you also can't blame a teacher if they have students who are struggling in their class. And I think that's a message and a path that nobody, they're sitting behind me, I don't even have to turn around and look. No board member here wants to go down that path. We are very diligent about looking at the scores, monitoring for progress. What do we need to do differently? Do we need a new assessment? Do we need to assess sooner in the year? How long before we do intervention if we're not seeing progress? Mrs. Latour and her team are all over that, and any principal in this district can talk in detail about what their data means, what it means to their students and families, and how their students by grade level, by classroom, are progressing. So there is a pulse on that, but I really caution anybody to suggest that we should be looking at teachers' pay and connecting that with test scores.
Well, you certainly can incentivize. I'm not telling, the pay is set, and then you could set up a system, and I'm just trying to think outside the box here, where, and I understand each classroom is very difficult, but, you know, schools work in teams also, and you recognize where, you know, something could be dealt with differently. So, you know, you could take, because we have these schools with, you know, a lot of grades within the school, I don't see what would preclude you from saying, okay, if the third grade, all of the classes at this particular school raises their grades on average by 4 points, then there's some sort of something. I'm not, I mean.
I know. I also struggle, and there are districts out there, Counselor Fishbein, who teach to the test, and I'm proud that we're not a district that does that. You know, there's districts out there that every Friday afternoon it's pencils down and kids get on computers and they just take SBAC sample tests so they know how to take the test when it comes in the spring. I don't want to be that district. I want kids to have real life skills, well-rounded. I want them to be able to understand what the Common Core standards are and work towards those. It's not just about being able to pass a test.
No, I understand, but I also run across kids, there's reading comprehension issues.
I get it.
There's writing, I mean, there are, so.
I could stay here all night and talk about that with you.
Oh, I
You
know.
know it.
And I mean, when I'm hearing teachers don't have the skills and we're having to bring in teachers to teach teachers, then fundamentally, there is a problem.
There is a
somewhere.
problem, and there is a problem at the teacher prep program. And a recent poll showed of college professors what they were teaching, how many college professors thought that it was okay that cueing is where if you're reading a picture book and there's a horse and it says horse in the sentence and the student says pony, okay, well, you got the word right because you got the context. It wasn't in print, it was HORSE, but it wasn't what the student said. That's cueing. Over 50% of higher ed reading professors right now still believe cueing is an adequate method to teach teachers how to teach reading. That's a problem. We have a problem with the whole right to read. It's wonderful, but it's got to start at the teacher prep programs. We are spending an inordinate, as an entire state, an inordinate amount of money to teach teachers how to teach reading once they get into the classroom. And they need to learn those skills when they're getting their teaching degree.
Amen.
So I know how
I'm
you're
just-
going to vote on that.
I'm just looking to see what we're doing here in Wallingford to get.
I will tell you, Literacy How has been with our district. We probably have the longest standing relationship. Literacy How is a consulting firm that came out of Haskins Lab at Yale University, and they are some of the founders, Margie Gillis, and she's done presentations to the board also on the science of reading and what children really need to learn in order to comprehend, read with automaticity, understand phonics and phonemes. She understands all of that. Her business has been working with Wallingford Public Schools for 4 years now. We are probably, if not the longest standing district working with her, in the top 2 or 3. Some districts have chosen the approach to go in and teach and train 20 or 30 teachers and have them be the trainers for the rest of the district. We have taken the approach of teaching every teacher. So every teacher gets pulled out for a certain number of hours and goes through the learning curriculum with Literacy How, then goes back into the classroom to implement it. And then they have a coach helping them. How did I do with this? What should I do different? Did this student respond? Wow, look at this was a breakthrough. All these students went up in this area. Not every district has done that. We have done that. And we are at the point now that we can actually see, and Mrs. Latour I know is behind me, we can see what the differences are in test scores as we go through the year on our evaluations. We plot September, winter, spring, and we can see the growth of students. Unlike what we weren't here 5 years ago when we were looking at this. We were in our infancy with trying to get on board with the science of reading. This is, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this area. But we are, in my feeling, if the state of Connecticut does not grant Wallingford the waiver, they're crazy. Because we are one of the premier districts who have a plan in place to address reading and to address the test scores. I don't see us going backwards. COVID, if it wasn't for COVID, we would be in a different place now with our test scores.
So as a result of COVID, we have the chronic absenteeism issue. How is that being addressed?
Chronic absenteeism, and I should let,
Go ahead.
I'm taking her microphone. I'll let her speak because there was multiple reasons for chronic absenteeism. A lot of times we had to tell students to stay home if they had the sniffles, if they coughed, if they had any type of a symptom.
Yeah, I don't
they
take
were-
that as absenteeism. I take
It's counted as absenteeism, though.
Oh, understood, but it's the, I don't want to go to school, I don't like school, that's the thing that I'm, sick kids or something different.
Right, so we have a committee that we formed through the district under the guidance of our Assistant Superintendent for Special Education that sort of addresses that, and so looks at our students and why they're not coming to school and what the issues are at all levels. Reaching out to the families, communicating with them. Our administrators do a fabulous job as well, communicating with those families, trying to get these kids back into school. What are the reasons why they're not coming into school? Why are they absent all the time? Where can we provide supports? Where can we connect them with the supports the families need as well? So we're looking at the relationship we have with Mandy Miranda and Youth and Social Services. We have Merit and Child Guidance that comes in and provides supports to our students and also to our families. We have our social workers and school psychologists that work with the families, that work with the students. So we're doing as much as we can to continue to give them what they need to make sure the students are coming to school. And so it's a work in progress. We have administrators doing home visits with staff to go and get these kids back into school and to talk to them at home and bring them back and encourage them to come back.
So I will tell you, Mandy and I have been working together on, I have a bill in Hartford, the Family with Service Needs program, getting that restored and having it extended to kids that are truant. So we did get that out of committee, and I'm working on that. And that will be another tool, but I'm glad to hear that you're working together with her. The strategic plan, the 5-year situation, I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think we need that.
on the general side of government, we do that. Part of this budget has a plan like that. It goes before planning and zoning every year. So, and nothing stops, in my opinion. When we want to buy a fire truck on this side, we take $100,000 year one and put it in an account for the fire truck. You got the 2% account. I would have no problem with you saying, this is earmarked in the 2% account for a field, right? And then we know what it's going to be used for. I'm just speaking for myself. And then I see people here with signs about special ed. Special ed, very important to me. In here, I don't see any cuts, so
It's
what's
correct.
going on?
So there is, through these grants, we had added a special education teacher for specialized programs. As you know, we have specialized programs throughout K through 12, pre-K through 12. And so we base the need for teachers based on the needs of the students in the programs. So as we were looking at, when we were planning for the budget, it's a grant-funded special education position. So as we were looking at our specialized programs for next year and how many students we're going to have in each level, we don't need the additional teacher right now for one of our specialized programs. And so that's where, because they're special education teachers as well.
Which program is that?
So it would be at our elementary level, it's called our WISE program. So looking at that, right now where we are, we feel like the number of students that we have progressing through that program, we would not need that teacher.
And last topic, I know there's been difficulty with the program that we have for special needs kids, getting them set up. I know, Tammy, you and I have talked about, where is this program going to be?
I know.
It keeps on getting
I know.
moved, and the redheaded stepchild, basically. What is the status?
I can't say. It's, you will be happy, and we will be coming to you with the solution for town council approval. I know you're talking about the Transition Academy.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's in negotiation, so I can't say.
Okay, as long
It
as,
has a plan. It does have a plan.
You will be
and you'll
very happy.
Tammy
yeah,
knows.
You'll
if
hear.
I'm
I am
gonna be
very happy.
Yep.
Amen.
We have a
Okay.
good plan for that, so we'll be bringing that
And
forward
we'll be on
shortly.
an agenda soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Allenson?
Okay, so as we went through and we kind of talked about all of these, the cuts and the implications of the cuts, if we were to cut, sorry, I've got my finger in all of the places I'm supposed, so if we were to cut 3.02% of the total plan, I mean, even if we did nothing from the strategic budget, that means a sustained services cut. So, and the two highest lines of sustained services all have to do with personnel. So I just want everyone up here to understand that if we do cut the budget by that amount, we are going to be losing people in the district, because inevitably, that is the consequence of cutting a budget when when the sustained services budget is increasing just naturally by wage increases, which are appropriate, insurance increases, which are industry standard, et cetera. We will have to cut personnel. So it's not a matter of, if we just don't approve this, we're going to go on business as usual. It's not business as usual. So I do just want to point that out. Tammy, I'm glad you talked about teaching to the test, because that's often what happens when you incentivize improving scores as such. And I don't know who was suggesting, oh, never mind, that was part of that, okay. I just find it, I guess I just have two more observations. I find it ironic that a lot of teachers are coming out of state schools from training, teacher training, right? But yet it's the state who's also implementing this requirement to use their software. So I do find that a bit of a double dip on the state's perspective. Maybe Councilor Fishbein can get involved there as our representative. Sorry. Or actually Representative Fishbein with that hat on, apologies. So I just think that that's, I don't know, I don't think it's appropriate. I did also want to talk about one other thing, and I don't know if we have something like this, I just don't see it here, and it's been a minute for me since board, but do we have anything, any programs in place or going into place outside of like, that will be continuing services for addressing summer learning loss? I heard about a program for STEM summer learning loss out of Hartford Y, and I was like, oh my God, so now I'm teaching robotics through Lego to Hartford kids, but I'm like, do we have anything like this here? It sounds amazing, so please?
We do have summer programming that we provide. And so we provide it at all levels. Actually, it's offered through elementary currently. Well, last year we offered it elementary all the way through. So it can be credit recovery. It can be providing reading support, especially for our elementary level students. We have both, for the regular ed, assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction runs programs, and Amy Turner, our assistant superintendent for special education, runs numerous programs. So yes, we do.
And is that only to make up credits, like if somebody has done poorly, or can a parent enroll a student who, just to make sure that they don't fall behind over the summer?
It depends on the level. So primarily the elementary level is to provide the extra supports.
Okay.
And then primarily at the high school level, it's credit recovery or classes that they need.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
All right, I don't see any more hands up here, so questions or comments from the public? A resounding stillness. Sir, your name and address for the record, please.
Jason Michael, 81 Meadow Street. It's a quick question, and although it doesn't have to do with this particular budget, I've asked it of numerous people in this room, and I've called the state just to find out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as we set these budgets each year, there's a floor, and that floor is a hard floor, right? And there's never lowering that floor. Is that right? Is that by state decree? So if we were to decide on a single school, does the opportunity come in front of us to reset that floor? Does anyone know the protocol there?
We should probably find that out at some point in the process. Mayor?
Well, I suppose you could say educated guess, but it is a guess. It's the total amount of money spent on education. It's not by school. So if you had one school where all elementary and all the students were in one building, you would be expected to spend the same amount of money as if you had 12 schools. So that would be my interpretation of what the statute means.
Okay, thank you. I would imagine one of the driving factors would be to lower the cost of running 2 high schools versus 1. So in my mind, I would imagine that the needed cost would be less. And I didn't know if we had to start at this hard floor, even if we come to a new configuration of schooling. But that was all. I mean, I just was curious. I figured I had the right people all in one place. I might get the answer. Thank you.
Melanie Risacci, 9 Platt Drive. My question is, I think it's maybe more for the mayor. Why was the budget reduced by 3.515 million when for the past several years for the overall budget for the town, there was at least $7 million left over? And if we have facilities that are not where they should be, they're not up to par, our fields are not up to par, and we have higher need students that are around, why are we cutting the education budget when the past several years we always have surpluses that just go to a general fund when our kids are really in high need?
Well, budgeting is always a review of estimated costs. And I don't believe I've probably ever approved the requests as given to me at the beginning of a budget. And from my standpoint, it's unaffordable by the public. If we look at the results of every budget year, the Board of Education budget has shown money left over, and most departments have shown money left over. Certainly part of that is because a budget is made up of estimates. And legitimately, people are conservative in their estimates because they don't want to end up with a deficit during a year. But we're seeing in this, in the information from the Board of Education that there'll be at least approximately, at this point, $9 million left over from this year. And it may be more, maybe a little less, but that's the estimate.
Sorry, Mayor, that's 900,000.
I mean, 900,000, sorry. $900,000. $900,000, so it's about $1 million. It could be more than that, might be less, but there's money left over. And that's true for other departments as well. You don't want to have budgets end up at zeros, because at that point, the community is in some serious financial difficulties. We need to maintain a reserve of money in order to garner better borrowing rates. So there's a credit rating reserve that we need to preserve. With regard to our utilities, they have a multi-million-dollar reserve for the utilities because of these types of factors. You're managing the money. You don't want it to be something that's all spent and then try to recreate everything from the beginning. So there are sound accounting and financial policies that dictate how you handle public money.
But our
But
facilities
thus
are in
far,
disarray.
there is money left over every year, and it's a good thing there is, because we probably would not be able to afford some of the things we provide the next year as a result of that. Taxes would be higher.
They would be higher, but I think we would pay a little bit more if our school buildings were in better shape and our fields were in better shape. We have athletes on that Sheehan field that are tearing their ACLs because there are holes in the field. And we're talking about, potentially combining high schools because the schools are in such bad shape to renovate to new. We have elementary schools that are not where they should be. Our middle schools are not where they should be, and it's embarrassing in comparison to the other towns. And we need to do something about it.
Anyone else? Then I bring it back to the council before we move on to the cafeteria budget. Seeing no hands, then we are on to the cafeteria budget.
Just give us a second. We have another person coming up.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, the cafeteria budget for school
So
year...
two things, please. We need you closer to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
And second thing, for the benefit of those of us who might not remember who you are, if you could please remind us.
Jim Bondi, Food Service Director.
Thank you.
So the 2023-2024 cafeteria budget, we have, I'll just go down and give you the highlights, and then go into how I came about those numbers, and then take any questions. So we're anticipating total revenue next year of $2,393,801. Total product cost of $1,053,272. Total payroll cost of $1,242,531. Other direct cost of $97,565,000. For a total surplus of $433. Getting back to the revenues, meal counts. First, I need to say that this budget is based on a normal, quote, normal school year where we are not providing free meals to every student. As of this moment in time, the state has not, or has no plans to extend the free meals for all students to next year. It should end on June 30th. However, there is mass protests going on. I know there was a meeting at the state today, so that may change, I'm not sure, but we will need to see what happens. But as of now, as of this moment in time, there are no plans to provide free meals for all students next year. So, meal counts for this budget are based on historical records from past normal years, and there's always slight increases in free and reduced meals. We always seem, year after year, to have a more free and reduced students through direct certification from the state. Breakfast revenues are based on anticipated breakfast counts, times established breakfast pricing and anticipated reimbursements. Lunch revenues are again based on anticipated lunch revenue counts and established lunch pricing and established anticipated reimbursement. Our a la carte and adult revenue is based on historical average. Currently, we're doing about $1,334 per day. Our catering and other are based on actuals from last school year. And our state grant payments are based on actuals from 2021-2022 school year, which include breakfast grant payments, state match funds, and healthy food payments. Breakfast and lunch reimbursement are based on anticipated rates. Usually for breakfast, the state pays us, or the state increases the reimbursement rate by 2 cents for every paid meal and about 14 cents for every free and reduced meal, and we anticipate that that will be the case next year. For lunch reimbursement, the state usually increases the paid lunch rate at 2 cents and about 27 cents for the free and reduced lunch reimbursement. Our bank interest is based on past history. For our expenses, food costs, which has been a concern in the last 2 or 3 years because of shortages and supply chain issues, that is easing. I'm happy to say that situation is easing. I think the markets for food are reaching equilibrium. There is we have had very few shortages and supply chain issues in the past few months. So we're anticipating, I hate to say the word normal, but a more normal food market going forward. So we're anticipating food costs at 40% of revenues. We also have increased government commodity foods that are allocated to us for next year from the federal government, and we get commodities allocated to us through the amount of meals we serve in the previous year. So last year, with all meals being free, we were able to serve many more meals, and we get more federal commodities through that. Our paper cost is expected to be about 3%, and that's a historical average. Our labor cost, we have an anticipated increase. However, because we are anticipating that we will not be serving free meals to all students next year, there will be a decrease in needs for substitutes and a little less labor hours worked. And we also have an increase in benefits. Other direct costs are based on historical averages. So, any questions, comments?
Councilor Laffin?
Thanks. The free meal reimbursement from the state, is that?
It's actually, I'm sorry, this federal government.
Federal government, sorry.
Yes.
Is that dollar amount directly respective to what we charge a student?
Yes, we have to, when we set pricing, we have to consider that reimbursement
Okay.
rate.
the shortages in supply that you referenced and were apparent, did the federal pay adjust for the increased cost?
Definitely.
That supply
yes.
and demand?
Yes,
Okay.
that was the whole premise behind and again, with the state this year, the whole premise behind the free meals for all.
Okay. And then, is there any balance or truth to the observation of my kids and their friends that when the free lunch exists, that the meal portions and everything are smaller
No.
versus when they buy? Because that is the
No, because we'd
economic
be-
lesson going through the school system right
No,
now.
that is not the case, because we'd
Not
be in
mention the
violation of
quality,
federal
but-
law if we did that.
Okay. And I was starting to write a note about the meal cost, but I stopped to ask questions. So I think that's good. Thanks.
Counselor Testa?
Thank you. Good evening. I just want to point out for the public, I'm correct in assuming and reading this that there is no Board of Ed, therefore no town contribution to your operation in this
Correct.
budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there's nothing really to question here. But I have to ask, what happened? Where'd all that money come from last year?
The federal reimbursement rate, because we were serving free meals,
Okay,
was
is that
the
it?
highest it could have been.
Yeah, I was going to say you did not sell that many.
And we also received extra federal grants for supply chain issues.
So that's fantastic. So you've been able to develop a fund balance,
Correct.
which I'm assuming you're holding on to for emergencies and equipment or whatever you might need
No,
down the
actually,
road.
by law, we are required to put it back into the operation.
Well, that's what I mean. You're going to.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to how soon you have to do that?
We have to do that as soon as possible.
Oh.
However, we are finding that, and this, I know it doesn't pertain to food per se anymore, but we're trying to buy vehicles. There are none to be had. We're trying to get, upscale, not upscale, but expensive equipment, and we're having trouble getting bids for them.
Right. But if perchance you, things went different than you're anticipating and
There's a
you have
cushion
this
there.
fund balance to fall back on, you wouldn't have to come back to
Correct.
the board in the town anyway.
Correct.
Correct.
So you're carrying a healthy fund balance for investment into your own program. I mean, I remember back when I was on the board,
We used
we were-
contingency every year to
well,
fund
no,
the deficit.
Well, when I was there, it was that Charlene was operating with an incredible profit.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, and times change, circumstances change. So it was always nice to say, this fund, we would just look at this and say, nice job, thank you, keep it up. So I think it's good that everybody should know clearly that no tax dollars are going to operate the cafeteria fund. It's self-sustaining and carrying a fund balance that it could reinvest as needed.
Correct.
So that's all I wanted
If there's
to
any
say.
way we can take back those Board of Ed contributions that are on this sheet, we'd love to do that and put that back in
you know.
sustained.
It's okay.
I asked, I was told no, but I tried.
Maybe we could take a few of these dollars and give Tom's kid a bigger hamburger.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Absolutely.
He just wants more chicken nuggets.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And you know what? I have to say this as well. I'm right next door to one of your facilities. My room connects to the cafeteria, kitchen. And I can't stress enough, I'm talking to the public now, I walk through that facility frequently, and if it's first thing in the morning, they're washing, peeling, cutting fresh vegetables, preparing fresh salads. All of the food preparation is impressive. Yeah, it's always going to be school food, we know that, but our school food is good food, and a lot of it is fresh food.
Yes.
Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. The salads are made daily. People need to know this. And I see the workers doing it. So I just want the public to know, that that's what's going on, and we're very fortunate to have
We
the
are.
operation we do have.
We
So
are,
thank you
and-
for what you're doing.
Counselor Testa, to your point, there was a time that we had an item on our strategic planning list to replace the large storage cooler. That's gone because we don't use the freezer the way we used to. Mr. Bounty has done a phenomenal job scheduling the government commodities that we get and using them as they come in, to your point of fresh items, and not freezing them for weeks or a month or two before serving them.
And then the people you have running those, at least the high schools that I see. Mary is amazing,
Yeah.
and you know that.
We have a great
And,
crew.
yeah,
I
they're
can't
just
can't ask for better.
tremendous people. And they work so hard and they put their heart into it, and it makes me happy to see.
Counselor Fishburne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too have been up here a while, I mean, years, and, I've tracked, but I appreciate the numbers that I'm looking at, but I have to question if in 2022, based upon what we're seeing, there was a direct contribution from the Board of Ed of $100,000, right? Year ending 2022. We know that this year is an anomaly, and just this year, because right now there's no projection of free meals into next year, right? You're probably going to end up, based upon these numbers, with a surplus of about 700,000 because halfway through the year you had 337, right? Why would, and if next year is back to norm, why wouldn't you reasonably anticipate, because the last 10 years you've had to have a contribution, why wouldn't the budget reflect some sort of contribution to, there's a line that says fund balance contribution, right? Why, I mean, I'm hearing everything's going to go back to normal, you've had to supplement.
But we have a fund balance to use. We had to contribute before, and the fund balance contribution of $100,000 was more of a timing issue in that year.
Well,
It was a cash flow issue. We would use the existing fund balance if there was a unanticipated deficit for the 23-24 year.
understood. So I'm looking at page 88, and on line, well, it isn't a numbered line, for the 2022 budget, there was a contribution not from the cafeteria to the cafeteria, from fund balance to the cafeteria. There was a transfer from the regular Board of Ed.
$100,000.
$100,000, got it, okay. So the line above that, though, is fund balance contribution. Why wouldn't you budget the $100,000 that generally you have had to transfer in that line? Based upon the budget that we're showing, you're anticipating to be in the black next year, even though the free lunch program may not exist.
So I guess when we started 21, 22, we had about $150,000 fund balance. We're going to start with over, $1.3 million next year, if these projections pan out. So there's money within the fund itself to absorb the deficit.
But you would show that in the fund balance contribution line, wouldn't you? That's exactly what it's there for.
Yeah, but we would if we thought we were going to have a deficit.
And that brings the question. So are you telling us that next year, based upon your projections, even though we're not going to have assuming we're not going to have the free lunch program, that you're going to be in the black? I mean, that's something I'd like to hear, but I don't know what that's based upon, because the trend the last 10 years was.
I understand that, a couple different things, and to Councilor Testa's point, I think the quality of the food is changed under Mr. Bondi. We also finally serve breakfast in this town. So, and we make breakfast available to all students. Previous to COVID, we had a breakfast option available to students at the high school, and that was it. We had elementary students coming to school hungry, going to the nurse's office with stomach problems and stomach pain to get a snack, because they hadn't eaten since their lunch at school the day before. Now, there is a huge participation in the breakfast program. That will stay post-COVID, and that was a huge, heavy lift to take on during COVID, but it was something that was very, very needed. So, do we have a crystal ball to see how many students will keep getting the breakfast? Well, we know the free and reduced will, because if they're free and reduced lunch, they're also qualified for a free breakfast. Do we know how many students will do the grab the bag and go as a paid breakfast? We haven't experienced that environment, that landscape yet. But we are very hopeful with the breakfast and the increased quality of lunch that this should be a self-sustaining program. There should not be either a fund contribution or a Board of Ed contribution. This should be able to sustain itself.
I've been saying that for 14 years. So,
And I've been saying that I wanted breakfast for a long time,
so procedurally, I think the enterprise fund, where this is supposed to operate like an enterprise fund, where
Yes.
it's self-containing.
It's a special
Special-
revenue fund. It's
Yeah.
not, so it's kind of a hybrid between the electric and those, and like maybe your Parks and Rec fund where they collect fees. It's,
So it was my understanding that it's not like the Board of Ed budget in that your transfers are controlled differently. My understanding was if you don't put it on the paper, then it's more problematic. Am I wrong?
we didn't budget the $380 and the $100,000. We didn't budget that during budget time. We made those transfers through board action to Councilor Tada's point earlier, that once we get a lump sum, we can move money as needed. So when those years came up that we knew that there was a problem in food service and they needed the funds, we transferred that year. So even though you see it here, those were not budgeted transfers that came in front of the town council. You didn't see it back in 2021 or 2022.
But the distinction there is that was an appropriation by Board of Ed,
Correct.
which can do anything. Go buy grass seed, right? You can do anything, right, with that money. I think the distinction is you're representing that you're going to have about $700,000 in the bank, and that you may have to use a portion of that $700,000 to supplement this. That would not be a transfer from Board of Ed into this budget. This would be internal to the cafeteria special fund, which my understanding is you're constrained if you don't have it in this budget, but I leave it upon you guys to figure it out. So I
Would
just
we be
think,
then constrained if we over budgeted for it? Would it be earmarked? So if we did say fund contribution amount, whatever, say $200,000, does that mean that it's now earmarked for a contribution that we can't go buy a combi oven for it when our oven breaks?
I don't think you can
So
in
that's
this
kind of-
particular budget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It
It's sort of
locks
like
it in.
contingency.
it locks it in.
Yeah. Well, anyway, okay. I
It's a good
enjoyed,
discussion to have. I'm glad we're having that instead of a discussion on deficits and cafeteria.
we'll talk about scores again? Anyway.
I will,
Thank you.
know
Thank
I
you,
will.
Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Laffin?
Thank you. He can bring up the Janus decision too, if you want to bring that up again.
I'm bringing chicken nuggets if that happens.
Then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
The Charlene Profits thing, when Counselor Testa was on the board and I was after him, that was franchise and pizza.
Absolutely.
Snapple, yeah.
Back,
Then there
that was
was
back
some
in the old
parent-
days when we were allowed to serve
Correct.
anything.
I was going to give a whole history, but yeah, that
Yeah.
you just jumped.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then the state tried to eminent domain our cheese one time, and then the healthy food initiative
That's
that we
it.
kept voting to stay out of, and then we got forced into, and nobody wanted to eat that kind of pizza anymore. So yeah, you're playing in my point to that is you're playing in a completely different game now. It's apples and oranges.
Yes.
Literally.
Yeah. Well, no, it's French fries and apples now, so nobody wants the apples. So congratulations on doing a good job with yucky food and over healthy stuff. I did realize my question though. The percent of meal cost, is there a direct correlation between that and staffing? So when the federal government gives you more money, you said we'll need to hire more people. If we go into free lunch mode,
Correct.
now all of a sudden we've got to hire, we have a huge, we're not just paying per meal, now we have this huge increase
Yes, we
for
do have an
staff.
increase in staff due to the demand.
Yeah, and is that something you just kind of eat in these other budget
Well,
lines you have,
luckily,
or?
due to the federal reimbursement rate, we can absorb it. and,
Okay.
You know.
That's what I meant, like,
helps
is every,
immensely, yeah.
is 10 cents for every meal go towards staffing or something? I don't know, I'm just,
Not necessarily, it's just,
it works out.
it works, yeah.
Okay, less chicken nuggets because we have more people. No. Okay, all right, thank you.
Questions or comments from the public? There being none, that is all the business we have tonight. I want to thank you all, you know, whether we agree, disagree, or move on. I appreciate your dedication to what you do. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Yep.
you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I declare the meeting adjourned.